This entry, it speaks of a betrayal that shattered more than just a family bond, she said softly, her eyes glimmering with both scholarly interest and a profound empathy. It seems this wasn't merely a matter of personal vendetta, but something that altered the destinies of many. Look here, notice the reference to a significant loss woven into the narrative. I believe this might be alluding to a death one that was hidden under layers of silence and secrecy. My name is Anna Moreau, a name that sounds steeped in European elegance and mystery, and despite my American upbringing, the weight of my bloodline made itself known in the quiet moments of my solitary nights. The Moreau family, as revered as it was enigmatic, had long since drifted from its European aristocratic roots into an entirely new identity here in the United States. My grandmother, Isabel Moreau, was the living embodiment of this chasm. Tall, with silvering hair swept into a severe bun, and eyes that betrayed nothing but an icy remoteness, she ruled over our family with a quiet authority. Then, one crisp autumn morning, everything began to change. I had just returned from a routine meeting with an editor who encouraged me to write a piece on family heritage, a topic that had simmered in my heart for years. That afternoon, when I opened the mail, a single envelope caught my eye. It was old, its paper, a delicately yellowed parchment with a faint scent of lavender and dust. The handwriting on the envelope was elegant but unfamiliar, inked in a style that hinted at forgotten traditions. My pulse quickened as I turned the envelope over in my hands. There was no return address, only the cryptic inscription, "For the eyes of Anna Moreau, your past awaits." The moment I broke the seal, a flood of images cascaded through my mind. The letter was composed of a series of elegant, looping cursive lines that recounted details of a secret so profound it chilled me to the bone. In it, a voice unknown and yet so intimately familiar spoke of betrayal and irrevocable loss. The language was both poetic and heavy with sorrow, inviting me to step into the labyrinth of memories my grandmother had so carefully concealed. I read and reread its contents late into the night, letting the words resonate with every nerve. With every sentence, the image of a fractured family, a betrayal, left festering in distant corners of Europe, and the pain of hidden truths seemed to imprint itself on my soul. That letter was a spark, a dangerous, burning ember of revelation that set my heart alight with curiosity and trepidation. I found myself returning to those documents in the dusty corners of our small family archive, piecing together fragments of conversations overheard at family dinners and obscure references made at rare gatherings by relatives. Everything pointed to a past marred by guilt, sorrow, and secrets that time had not healed. At the center of these murmurings was an event shrouded in darkness, one that had once split our family apart and was the source of immeasurable regret. I could almost feel the cold breath of disapproval when I thought about my grandmother's silent command to never speak of it. How could the very woman who had nurtured me allow such an abyss to form between us? In the days that followed, I became a ghost in my own life. I roamed the buzzing streets of New York, my eyes scanning faces in search of an emotion I knew was buried within me, some remnant of connection to that lost heritage. Every subway ride, every rainy evening was a reminder that my destiny lay somewhere beyond these familiar cityscapes, in the twisting lanes of an old European town where my ancestors whispered secrets to the night. The letter was my invitation to cross an ocean to seek truths that might shatter the delicate illusions of safety I had built around myself. I began to imagine my grandmother's life. I pictured Isabel as a young woman in a gilded parlor surrounded by extravagance, yet held captive by a secret that made her both powerful and profoundly vulnerable. I wondered if perhaps her cold demeanor was merely a mask for the depths of regret and sorrow that lay hidden beneath. If I dared to travel, would I be able to grasp the reasons behind her silence? Even as I entertained such thoughts, a grim certainty settled within me. No truth, however painful, could remain hidden forever. Late one evening, as New York's skyline shimmered against the twilight, I sat at my small writing desk, the mysterious letter spread out before me. The ink had smudged, slightly the edges of the paper curled as if the passage of time had attempted to reclaim it. I felt as though I were staring into the eyes of a long-departed relative, urging me to look deeper into the tangled past of our family. My heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and excitement for the promise of revelation, and fear of what truths might come crashing down. With resolute determination tinged by trembling uncertainty, I made a promise to myself. I would follow the trail laid out in that faded letter. I would journey to the heartlands of old France, where every stone, every whisper of wind carried echoes of our ancestors. I would unlock the secrets that had been buried under layers of time and silence. And perhaps in understanding what had once been lost, I could forge a bridge between the fragmented pieces of my identity and mend the rifts within my family. I could almost hear my inner voice urging, "Take the risk, Anna. Trust that the road to healing lies in the confrontation of the past." In that moment, it felt as if the city's relentless pulse echoed my own racing heart, a drumbeat guiding me toward destiny and difficult truths. I knew that the web of betrayal, loss, and hidden guilt would soon pull me into a confrontation that I had long feared. Yet the allure of truth was irresistible, and its magnetic force promised not only answers, but perhaps even the redemption that had eluded so many in the Moreau lineage. As dawn broke the next day, I packed my few belongings with a sense of urgency and anticipation. Each item I folded into my small suitcase seemed to carry a fragment of hope, a hope that someday, by revealing these dark chapters of our past, my family could finally heal. Today, New York felt both familiar and foreign, the bustling streets a constant reminder that while my life here was full of promise, my heart belonged to the mystery of where I truly came from. Thus began my journey, a journey into the depths of forgotten memories, into the shadows cast by long-held secrets, and towards a destiny that promised both heartbreak and the possibility of forgiveness. I was no longer just the writer who felt lost amid the bright chaos of the city. I was a seeker of truth, irresistibly drawn into the vortex of my family's hidden history. And as I stepped out into the early morning light, the echo of a future filled with both responsibility and redemption resonated within me. There in the quiet resolve of that new day, I could almost make out the faint outline of Europe, beckoning me a land of ancient castles, whispered regrets, and the promise that the past, however dark, could eventually pave the way for healing. I arrived in Paris on a damp, fog-laden morning that blurred the boundaries between past and present. The city wore its history like a regal cloak, cobblestone streets, time-worn facades of ancient buildings, and the soft murmur of voices and languages that seemed to echo secrets of bygone eras. Every step I took felt like walking into a carefully curated museum of emotions and memories. I couldn't help but feel that the crisp Parisian air carried whispers of my own past, a past I was now determined to unearth. My first stop was a modest cafe tucked away in a narrow street of the Latin Quarter, a quarter renowned for its intellectual spirit and centuries-old charm. There, waiting for me with a warm, reassuring smile, was Sophie Dubois. Sophie, a historian whose passion for uncovering hidden narratives was as vibrant as the art adorning the cafe walls had been my confidant since I decided to pursue the traces of our shared history. Her eyes bright with empathy and curiosity met mine as we embraced the promise of discovery. "Sophie, I can't shake the feeling that Paris holds the key to the darkness that's haunted my family for generations," I confessed, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly as memories of the mysterious letter stirred within me. Sophie leaned forward, lowering her voice in the cozy confinement of our corner table. "Anna, every city has its secrets, and Paris is no exception. But sometimes the deeper we dig, the more we realize that history is not black and white. There are layers, painful layers that once revealed can alter the way we see everything." Her words resonated, carrying both caution and encouragement. Armed with this blend of trepidation and resolve, we set off for the Bibliothèque Historique de la Ville de Paris, a venerable institution where the whispers of history fell silent under the weight of dusty tomes and brittle manuscripts. The library's vaulted ceilings and rows of meticulously arranged books offered a sanctuary from the modern hustle outside its walls. Here, time itself seemed to slow, inviting cautious inquiry into its well-guarded secrets. For hours, Sophie and I pored over ancient documents and faded letters that had long been neglected by the casual reader. I remember the feel of worn parchment beneath my fingertips as I traced delicate calligraphy that spoke of alliances, rivalries, and promises etched into the annals of family legacies. One document in particular caught my eye, a slender diary page with trembling handwriting as if penned by a soul tormented by remorse. The entry recounted a betrayal so profound that it was described in hushed tones as the fracture of a cherished union sealed by deceit and tragedy. The diary mentioned a moment when honor was sacrificed, a moment that hinted at the loss of an innocent life and a family forever marked by its scars. As I read, a chill danced along my spine. The prose was poetic, yet desperate, and even through the haze of archaic language, the message was unmistakable. A secret of betrayal cloaked in shadows had devastated lives long before I was born. I felt the weight of those words settling deep within my chest, a heavy burden that demanded to be understood, no matter how painful the truth might be. Sophie sensed my inner turmoil. This entry, it speaks of a betrayal that shattered more than just a family bond, she said softly, her eyes glimmering with both scholarly interest and a profound empathy. It seems this wasn't merely a matter of personal vendetta, but something that altered the destinies of many. Look here, notice the reference to a significant loss woven into the narrative. I believe this might be alluding to a death one that was hidden under layers of silence and secrecy. I nodded, my thoughts racing as I considered the implications. The diary hinted at names, faded signatures, and initials that stirred echoes of my own surname, and the very idea that the betrayal could circle back to my lineage was both horrifying and compelling. The narrative was not just a recount of a historical event. It was a mirror reflecting the pain and isolation that had long defined the Moreau legacy. Our research took us through the labyrinthine corridors of Parisian archives, each discovery a step closer to unveiling the truth. In a neglected section of the library, tucked behind towering shelves of documents, we discovered a bundle of letters tied with a fraying ribbon. The correspondence, dated back several decades, was exchanged between a distant relative and a mysterious figure whose identity was obscured by smoke and mirrors. The letters hinted at a troubled relationship, a rupture that was as personal as it was catastrophic, suggesting that someone had betrayed the family trust in a way that demanded silence at all costs. I found myself scribbling down every detail, every cryptic clue, determined to connect the fragments of this intricate puzzle. The deeper I delved, the more I felt the presence of my ancestors, spectral witnesses to the unfolding of a narrative filled with heartbreak and regret. The words on those pages seemed to cry out for recognition, for reconciliation, with a truth that had been buried for too long. Late one rainy evening, as rain pattered against the library's ancient windows, Sophie and I gathered around a worn wooden table, illuminated by a single trembling lamplight. The storm outside melded with the intensity of our investigation, wrapping us in an atmosphere charged with revelation and ominous beauty. Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the walls themselves might overhear. "Do you think you're ready for what you might find? Sometimes the truth can be far more unsettling than the mystery itself." Her words echoed in the quiet gloom, mingling with the steady rhythm of raindrops. I hesitated for a moment, caught in the delicate balance between anticipation and dread. "I have to know," I replied, my voice barely audible, yet resolute. "Every word I uncover, every detail is a piece of who I am, and every secret has its price. I must pay it." That night, as I left the library with a heavy satchel of documents and a mind teeming with revelations, the Parisian streets glowed softly beneath the rain. The city, with all its artful melancholy, seemed to cradle my determination and sorrow in equal measure. Every lamplight flickering on slick pavement felt like a promise that through understanding the wounds of the past, even the deepest betrayals might one day be forgiven. I spent the subsequent days diving deeper into the archives. Each document, each faded signature created an intricate tapestry of events that revealed a singular haunting truth. Our family's honor had been marred by betrayal that had exacted an irrevocable toll on an innocent soul. The evidence pointed toward a moment when loyalty was forsaken, and in its wake a death that had been concealed, leaving behind an aching void in the family's legacy. The more I learned, the clearer it became that this was not a tale confined to dusty papers and forgotten memories. It was a living wound fed by the silence and guarded by those who feared confronting it. I realized that each unanswered question was a fragment of my identity, a secret yearning to be acknowledged. And though the truth was seeping into every crevice of my heart, I knew I was only beginning to understand the depths of the betrayal and its unbearable costs. In that quiet city of eternal light and shadows, the dark secret of the Moreau lineage began to reveal itself in heartbreaking clarity. The documents, the diary entries, the veiled letters, all whispered of a moment when the forces of betrayal and loss collided with consequences that stretched far into the present. As I stood there in the echo of these revelations, I felt both the crushing weight of inevitability and the fierce, unyielding hope that through unmasking this painful history, healing might finally begin. As I prepared to leave the vast, silent halls of the archive, the storm outside had subsided, and a fragile dawn tinted the Parisian skyline with hues of possibility. With Sophie's support and the unrelenting drive to know the unspeakable truth, I stepped out into the awakening city, my heart bracing for the confrontation with destiny that lay just ahead. The secrets of the past were no longer content with obscurity. They were calling to be faced, and I was answering that call one determined step at a time. I arrived at the secluded farmhouse on a crisp morning that seemed to suspend time itself. Nestled among vast fields of golden wheat and ancient olive groves, the modest stone structure exuded a melancholic beauty, a relic of a bygone era quietly bearing the scars of its history. The air there was perfumed with the earthy aroma of dew-soaked soil and the faint whisper of secrets long buried, and as I stepped onto the creaking wooden porch, I felt the weight of an inescapable destiny press upon my soul. Inside the farmhouse was both sparse and haunting. Faded wallpaper and worn wooden floors spoke of years, filled with both quiet routine and silent suffering. It wasn't long before I encountered Uncle Henri, a man whose once vibrant eyes had gradually dimmed beneath layers of regret and sorrow. At the sight of me, his expression flickered with a mix of caution and resigned despair, a silent warning that I was about to step into a realm of truths too painful to unearth lightly. "Anna," he began, his voice low and trembling, as if each word carried the burden of a lifetime. "I know why you are here. I have waited so long for someone who would dare look into the darkness of our past." His hands, gnarled and lined with time, reached out as if to steady not only himself, but also the tremors of memory within our shared blood. I met his gaze with a mix of determination and trepidation. "Uncle Henri, I need to know the truth," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The documents, the letters, the whispered tales, they all point to a betrayal at the heart of our family. I can't move forward without understanding what happened." For a long moment, silence stretched between us, a silence filled with the echoes of unspoken grief. Then, with a heavy sigh that seemed to empty him of all remaining strength, Uncle Henri lowered himself into a creaking wooden chair by the dusty hearth, his eyes glistening with unshed tears locked with mine. "It is time, Anna. It is time to reveal what has haunted us for decades." He began softly, his words floating in the chill air of the room like fragile fragments of a long-forgotten song. "Your grandmother, Isabel, the woman you've revered for her strength and dignity, was not always the stoic matron you believe her to be. In her youth, she was passionate, yearning for a future that was as uncertain as it was promising. But our family was caught in a web of rigid expectations and an unyielding pursuit of honor, a pursuit that demanded sacrifice beyond what the heart could bear." My hands trembled as I listened. I had always sensed an unspoken complexity in Grandmother Isabel, a hidden sorrow that lurked behind her icy composure. Could it be that this very woman had made choices so devastating that they could fracture the bonds of our lineage? Uncle Henri's voice grew even more fragile as he recounted the fateful events. There was a man, René, gentle, honest, and in love with Isabel, with a fervor that could have warmed the coldest of hearts. His ideals were simple and pure. He believed in a love that transcended social constraints and family duty. But as the pressures of our aristocratic legacy bore down upon us, René's love was seen as a threat, a dangerous liaison that could unravel everything your grandmother had meticulously built for our future. He paused, his eyes clouded by the weight of memory. In the face of scandal and ruin, Isabel was cornered. For her, the preservation of our family's honor became paramount. In that desperate moment, she chose to extinguish the light that was René, silencing him forever. They staged his death as a tragic accident, a necessary sacrifice meant to preserve our standing in a world that would have crushed us beneath the burden of disgrace. His confession wavered between accusation and sorrow, as if he could not separate the act from the person he once loved as a sister. I felt as though the ground beneath me shifted violently. The woman I had idolized, the pillar of our family, issueless and unwavering, had orchestrated a betrayal so profound that it had stolen away not only a man's life, but the innocence of our heritage. How could it be? I whispered, the shock raw and unfiltered. I always believed she was the guardian of our dignity. How could she commit such an act? Uncle Henry leaned forward, his eyes pleading for understanding. Anna, I was part of that terrible day. I aided in covering up the truth, believing then, as I do now, that some secrets must be shrouded in silence to prevent further ruin. I was young, and the collective fear of losing everything clouded our judgment. I've carried that guilt with me every day since watching as the silence wove its poisonous web through our family's future. The room seemed to close in around me as his words sank in. Every creak of the wooden beams, every whisper of the wind outside bore down like a judgment. Uncle, why all these years of silence? I asked, struggling to steady my voice amid the barrage of emotions. Why did you never tell me the truth? Why let the shadow of this betrayal linger? His shoulders sagged under the weight of his confession. Because, my dear Anna, sometimes the truth is too burdensome to bear. We thought that by hiding it, we could protect you from the pain, protect the family from an avalanche of sorrow. Isabel herself believed that our legacy depended on secrecy. In her mind, preserving honor required absorbing the cost of guilt in silence. But that silence has only deepened our collective wounds. I sat there, tears threatening to spill as the full gravity of his revelation washed over me, a tide of sorrow, betrayal, and the bitter irony that the very person I had trusted to embody our family's integrity had been its architect of ruin. My mind clashed with itself. How could I reconcile the loving grandmother I remembered with the cold, calculating figure whom Uncle Henri described? The anguished confession left me reeling. Every fiber of my being screamed in protest, an inner battle between the need to know the instinct to forgive and the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Uncle, I understand now why the past haunts us, I said in a voice choked with emotion. But damn it, how am I supposed to love a woman who could commit such darkness? How can I ever forgive her? He searched my eyes as if seeking forgiveness on my behalf, a burdened hope that my acceptance might yet lift his own. Forgiveness is not a simple path, Anna. It is a journey through the shadows of our imperfections. Isabel acted out of a twisted sense of duty, a misguided belief that the sacrifice was necessary for the greater good. It does not erase what was done, but perhaps understanding her pain can offer us a sliver of redemption. I have lived with this secret, this guilt, for far too long. I only hope that by unburdening my soul, I can pave the way for healing. The farmhouse felt suddenly colder, as if the revelation had drained a warmth from the very walls. I stepped outside into the fading light of dusk, my mind a maelstrom of conflicted feelings. The endless fields around the farmhouse, once symbols of peace, now appeared as a vast tableau of regret and irreversible choices. I found a quiet spot on the weathered steps and sat, the cool stone echoing the chill that now gripped my heart. The confession had shattered the idealized image of grandmother Isabel that I had clung to all my life. Instead, I was now confronted with a woman who was as capable of immense love as she was of heartbreaking betrayal, a paradox too painful to fully understand yet too vivid to ignore. As darkness crept in around me, I couldn't help but wonder if the path to forgiveness was even possible. Could the wounds inflicted by such a betrayal ever truly heal, or would they forever splinter the fractured legacy of the Moreau family? Yet even in the depths of my despair, a small seed of hope began to germinate, as fragile as it was defiant. Uncle Henri's words resonated in the quiet night that truth, however bitter, could be the first step toward healing. If my family were to ever mend, if I were to redefine what it meant to be a Moreau, then embracing this dark history was the only way forward. The revelation, as shattering as it was, offered a glimpse into the complexity of love and duty, a reminder that even the most revered figures can harbor secrets that reshape destiny. Though the road ahead seemed treacherous and uncertain, I resolved that I would not let this revelation be the end of our story. I would carry it with me as both a painful reminder of our past and as a catalyst for change. In confronting the darkest corners of our history, I hope to illuminate a path toward forgiveness, understanding, and ultimately, redemption. As I finally stood and walked back toward the farmhouse, the chill of the evening was tempered by a determined resolve. I knew that the cost of truth was high, but it was the only currency that could redeem the legacy of our family. With every step, the echo of Uncle Henri's confession rang in my ears, a somber promise that by facing our past head-on, we might yet reclaim the honor that had once been so tarnished. I arrived at the ancestral Moreau estate on a brisk late afternoon when golden light filtered through ancient oak trees, and the manor seemed to breathe with the memories of countless generations. The imposing stone facade, choked by ivy and etched by time, radiated a melancholic dignity, a silent witness to both honor and hidden transgressions. My heart pounded with equal parts determination and trepidation. I knew that within these venerable walls lay the answers I sought and the truth I feared. Stepping through the grand, ornately carved front door, I was enveloped in a hush that seemed to hush even the passage of time. The foyer stretched out before me, adorned with portraits of ancestors whose eyes bore silent witness to familial triumphs and tragedies. I could almost hear their voices whispering secrets as I made my way through corridors laden with the weight of history. I had come here with one purpose: to confront grandmother Isabel. Though her presence in my life had always been as commanding as the estate itself, the woman I now sought to understand was shrouded in the dark legends that had driven my quest for answers. The truth as it had emerged in pieces from archives in Paris and painful confessions from Uncle Henri had led me inexorably to this moment of reckoning. I found her in the grand study, seated in a high-backed leather chair before a massive fireplace, its logs burning low with an amber glow. Grandmother Isabel's expression was unreadable, her proud, steely eyes momentarily softened by the flickering light that lent her an almost vulnerable air. For years, her silence had served as both a shield and a prison, a fortress protecting a secret that had tainted our family's legacy. Today, though, I would challenge that silence. "Grandmother," I began, my voice steady despite the tumult within me, "I have come to understand the depths of our family's past. I have read the diaries and uncovered the letters, and I met with Uncle Henri. I must know, why did you allow such darkness to fester? How did our esteemed lineage become tainted by betrayal and tragedy?" For a long moment she regarded me in silence. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fire and the distant sigh of the wind through the estate's corridors. Then, in a voice that trembled with decades of unshed sorrow, she spoke. "Anna, my dear, there are truths in this house that even the strongest heart can scarcely bear. What you call betrayal, it was a choice made under the crushing weight of honor, love, and despair." Her eyes shimmered with conflict as she continued. "When I was young, when love burned bright and recklessness tempted my soul, I encountered a man named René. His honesty, his gentle passion promised a future far removed from the rigid confines of aristocratic duty. But our family's honor demanded sacrifice, a price that shattered our hearts and haunted us ever since. I leaned forward, my pulse thundering in my ears. You silenced him forever, didn't you? You sacrificed his life, his very light, to preserve a legacy that even now seems doomed by its own darkness. My voice broke as years of silent questions found voice in that painful moment. Tears glinted in her eyes and she bowed her head in remorse. I did what I believed was necessary at the time. I chose our family's survival over a love that, though true, was deemed too dangerous for our future. Every day since I have carried the weight of that decision, I have lived in a prison of my making where each silence and each lie has chained me to remorse. Her words, raw and unadorned, filled the room with an ache that vibrated through the very walls. In that charged moment, I recognized the paradox of her nature. The same woman who had been the silent guardian of our proud heritage also bore the painful scars of an impossible choice. My anger and grief vied with a sudden empathy, a dawning understanding that the passage of time and the pressures of a rigid society had twisted the clarity of her heart. "Grandmother," I said softly, "I am not here to excuse what has been done or to forget the wounds that have defined our family, but I believe that true healing can only begin with truth, however bitter it may be. I need to understand your choice not to justify it, but so that we can move forward beyond the shadows of guilt and silence." The delicate air between us seemed to shift as if the heavy drapery of unspoken secrets was beginning to lift. Isabel's gaze met mine there, behind the veneer of aristocratic reserve. I saw a soul tormented by regret and longing for redemption. With a trembling sigh, she began to recount her story in painstaking detail, the swirling passions, the oppressive expectations, and the ultimate tragic decision that had sealed Renee's fate. Her voice wavered as she described how societal pressure and the terror of disgrace had converged in that fateful moment, leaving her little choice but to act in a way that has haunted each of us ever since. As the layers of guilt and sorrow unfolded in her confession, I felt a profound shift within me. The image of the cold, infallible matriarch of my childhood slowly gave way to that of a fragile, conflicted woman, a woman whose actions, however devastating, were rooted not in cruelty, but in the harsh duress of her circumstances. Each word she spoke, every tremor of regret, allowed me to see the complexity of the past in vivid, painful detail. "I cannot say I fully understand or agree with your actions," I admitted, my eyes welling with tears, "but I do see now that you too were a prisoner of a world that did not allow for the luxury of feeling. I know that neither of us were without blame. The silence, the secrets, they have all wounded us in some way." In that hushed confession, something remarkable occurred. With the slow, deliberate acceptance of the harsh truths we had both carried for so long, I found solace. I reached out and took her trembling hand in my own. "I forgive you, grandmother," I whispered. "Not because I believe the past can be undone, but because I cannot let this cycle of sorrow continue to rule our lives. I choose to look forward to heal so that our family may finally breathe free from the weight of unspoken regret." Her eyes glistened with gratitude and pain as she murmured, "Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself as much as to me, Anna. I have long dreamed of a day when our hearts could mend, even if I never believed I deserved it." In that raw moment of vulnerability surrounded by the ancestral echoes of Moreau history, I understood that forgiveness was not an erasure of the past, but its transformation, a means to reforge our broken bonds into something resilient and true. We sat together by the flickering fire until the night deepened around us. The portraits in the hallway, once silent and stern, seemed now to smile faintly, as if approving our tentative peace. In that old estate where every stone and every echo testified to generations of honor and sorrow, the act of forgiveness glowed like a small but unyielding flame, a promise that even in the darkest times, love and understanding can rise from the ashes of regret. Leaving the study later that night, I stepped into the cool embrace of the moonlit corridors with a heart that, while still heavy with loss, was lighter for the truth we had shared. I knew the scars of our past would never vanish entirely, but in forgiveness, I had found a way to transform them into quiet reminders of resilience and the possibility of redemption. The legacy of the Moreau family, once defined solely by secrets and sorrow, could now be reimagined, a narrative woven with both the agony of betrayal and the healing power of understanding. I walked out into the starlit gardens where the soft murmur of the night seemed to whisper, "You are free now." In that liberating silence, I embraced the realization that moving forward did not mean forgetting the past, it meant learning from it, allowing every painful memory to guide us toward a gentler, more forgiving future. The estate, with all its ghosts and grandeur, had given me the courage to write a new chapter, one where the shadows of yesterday make way for the promise of tomorrow. Returning to New York felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into a space both familiar and transformed. The once frenetic cityscape now spoke to me in softer, kinder tones, a mosaic of memories and possibilities interwoven with the gritty pulse of urban life. I stepped into my modest apartment, the worn wooden floors and cherished relics of a younger self greeting me like old friends. After months spent in France and on the isolated farm, I carried within me a truth so potent it demanded expression, a truth that could no longer live in the silent shadows of our family's past. At my antique writing desk, under the gentle glow of a vintage lamp, I opened a new notebook. Every blank page promised a rebirth, a chance to transform the legacy of secrets, betrayal, and pain into a narrative of healing and redemption. I began to write my pen, gliding over paper as if it were stitching together the fragmented pieces of my identity. With each sentence, I wove together the voices of those who had silently suffered in our lineage, the remorse of Uncle Henri, the anguished regrets of Grandmother Isabel, and my own desperate need for understanding and closure. The process was cathartic. I recalled the rainy evenings in Paris, the hushed confessions on that secluded farm, and our heart-wrenching conversation within the ancient walls of the Moreau estate. Each memory burst into focus as I relived the moments of revelation, the trembling admission of a hidden betrayal, the sorrowful recounting of a fateful choice made to preserve honor, and the painful yet liberating act of forgiveness that blossomed in the face of overwhelming grief. Every word I wrote was a step toward reclaiming a narrative that had been marred by silence for far too long. As dawn softened the edges of New York's skyline, I felt compelled to share my story with my family and the world. I titled the manuscript, "Echoes of Our Past," a nod to the enduring reverberations of our legacy and the hope that our shared truths could eventually dispel the shadow of despair. In the quiet hours of the early morning, I wrote with a steely resolve every secret disclosed was not meant to destroy, but to heal. Every confession a pathway toward reconciliation. The day I published my book was both triumphant and heart-wrenching. I remember the crisp autumn air and the crisp turning of pages in the local bookstore, where a modest launch was arranged. Relatives, old friends, and curious strangers gathered in that intimate space, their faces cast in a blend of skepticism and cautious hope. As I read aloud excerpts from my manuscript, I felt the weight of generations lift ever so slightly. The words, raw and unpolished, resonated with those present, an honest revelation of a family's struggle to balance the imperatives of legacy with the burdens of guilt. One by one, family members approached me after the reading. My mother, who had silently endured the tensions our secrets had sown, reached out with tearful eyes that glistened with a fragile new understanding. "Anna," she whispered, "your words have given us a chance to finally see each other as we are not just as keepers of a painful past." In that moment, I realized that the book was not merely an account of betrayal. It was a mirror reflecting the complexities of love, duty, and forgiveness, a tool for uniting hearts that had long been fractured by unspoken regrets. The impact of Echoes of Our Past rippled through our family, slowly but surely. Relatives who had previously cloaked themselves in anger or denial began to open up about their own hidden wounds. Conversations that once had been stifled by fear were now unfolding beneath a new light of mutual understanding. With each shared memory and tearful reconciliation, the bonds of our family grew stronger, each admission of pain a stepping stone toward healing. In recounting the elaborate tapestry of our lineage, I had inadvertently provided a framework for forgiving not only the misdeeds of the past, but also the self-judgments that accompanied them. My days were filled with long, thoughtful phone calls and quiet family reunions in the park where we sat on weathered benches, sharing stories and, more importantly, listening. I began to notice that the more openly we talked about our burdens, the lighter they became. It was as if in speaking our truths we had unburdened our souls and made room for compassion. Every smile exchanged, every quiet nod of understanding confirmed that we were at last on the path toward collective redemption. One particular evening remains etched in my memory. My grandmother Isabel, always so reserved and distant, came to my apartment unexpectedly. The autumn chill had given way to a soft, warm night as she stepped inside her steps, tentative and uncertain. Sitting opposite me, her eyes no longer shrouded by the impenetrable armor of secrecy, she spoke in a voice trembling with long-held sorrow and relief. "Anna, your honesty has healed wounds I thought would never close. For years I believed that silence was our only shield against disgrace. But now in your brave telling, I see that our silence has been our true enemy." Her words, painful yet cathartic, bridged the gap that had long separated us. In that moment, I forgave not only her, but also the inevitable human frailties that had driven her to such extremes. I realized that while the past could never be undone, it could be transformed into a beacon of hope. It could serve as a lesson in the strength of vulnerability, the power of forgiveness, and the profound resilience of the human heart. I saw it in the hesitant smiles of distant cousins reconnecting after years of estrangement, in the brave eyes of those admitting their share of guilt, and in the way our collective sorrow was slowly giving birth to collective joy. With time, I grew more at peace. The city streets of New York, once bustling with indifference to the hidden tragedies of aristocratic legacies, now pulsed with the promise of renewal, not only for me, but for every soul affected by our family's dark past. I found solace in the rhythm of everyday life, in the morning coffee at my favorite corner cafe, in the whispering winds along the East River, in the quiet conversations with neighbors who, unaware of our family saga, exuded genuine warmth. The process of writing and sharing my story had given me a newfound perspective that the courage to confront one's history can transform even the most harrowing past into a future filled with possibility. In these quiet moments, I smile knowing that despite the scars and the hard-won battles, I have finally found peace and happiness within my family. The journey from betrayal and silence to truth and forgiveness was not without its cost, but it has given us all a chance to truly see one another, to understand the depths of our shared humanity, and to step forward together into the light of a new day.